Hello and thanks for tuning in to watch another episode of Discussions with David. In today's video, we'll be talking a little bit about getting around Ireland, whether that's by train, tram, bus, car, bike or other. We'll go through some of the options and the costs and some of our experiences with transportation and getting around in the first 6 months we've been in Ireland. And I'll also talk a little bit about some of the differences between driving and the licensing element as a comparison between South Africa and Ireland. So some statistics there and a little bit of detail. Stay tuned and hope to learn something. When we first arrived in Dublin in July 2024, we chose consciously to stay temporarily in a place that had good public transport. As a family of 4, we stayed in the south of Dublin, near Sandyford. They had good connections to the LUAS, which is the rapid tram system that's above ground, mostly in Dublin. It's quite new. It initiated about 20 years ago. And the word LUAS is actually an Irish word for speed. When we first got here, we stayed about 200 meters from the Stillorgan tram stop, so that gave us good access into the Dublin city centre while we were still trying to get our bearings when it came to transport and traffic and getting around. The LUAS system stretches 43 kilometers and services 67 stops across the city and suburbs. I'll throw up a map just to give you some idea of those positions, but definitely if you're close to the LUAS, you've got pretty good rapid connectivity. At each of the stops, they have electronic display boards that will give you an indication of the time of the next tram. The trams operate Monday to Friday from 5:30 in the morning or 12:30. Saturdays from 6:30 a.m. till midnight. On Sundays and public holidays, you're looking at 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Frequency is dependent on peak and off-peak, but they typically operate every 3 to 5 minutes during peak hours and every 12 to 15 minutes during off-peak. I think the LUAS is a good example of the Irish world-class transportation system improving. As I said, it's 20 years old, so in the last 20 years it's significantly accelerated and expanded, and there are a lot of plans to increase it even further. There's currently the green line and the red line, which services the different areas of the city. The second option, which is quite good from the north to south direction, is the DART, which is the Dublin Area Rapid Transport, which is kind of your light rail system that runs along the coast of the Irish Sea from Malahide in the north down to Greystones and in County Wicklow in the south. This not only offers good public transport for those that live in these areas, but it has stunning scenic views of the seaside towns, making it a great way to explore the city for tourists. The DART hours of operation, similarly Monday to Saturday, trains run from 6 a.m. till 12 a.m. On Sundays, the trains run from 9 a.m. till 12 a.m. Typically, the DART runs every 10 minutes on the Malahide to Bray section in peaks, and outside of the peak hours and on weekends, it's every 15 to 20 minutes. On a Sunday, you can expect DART every 30 minutes, but it is advisable to consult a timetable just to make sure on the specific days that they are operating. DART services on the Howth to Greystones, slightly less frequently, but every 30 minutes. The LUAS and the DART services the Dublin metropole area, very functional, very usable. There's also the Intercity commuter trains. For the Intercity commuter trains, you've got the Dublin-Houston to Cork services, 16 trains per day. It takes about 2.5 hours to get down to Cork, 13 trains on the weekend, departing on the hour, every hour from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. from the Dublin direction, so quite easy to know when they do depart. You also have the Connolly to Belfast heading north from 10 to 6 till 10 to 9. Weekdays, 15 trains a day, and Saturdays and Sundays, 8 trains. The trip from Dublin to Belfast takes about 2 hours, 10 minutes, and is quite an efficient way to get up to Northern Ireland. You also have the east-west line that services Cork, Galway, Limerick, Rosslare, Tralee, Sligo, Waterford and Westport. Trains to Galway take about 2.5 hours, and there are 12 trains a day on weekdays and 10 trains a day on weekend, or 9 on Sundays and 10 on Saturdays. Although Ireland is quite small, they do have quite a good connectivity between the larger cities. But if you want to get to some of the smaller towns, the spread is not quite there, so you probably need to complement your train trip with a bus trip. In Dublin, buses are definitely the way to go. Very popular and convenient, widely accessible to get around. The Dublin Bus Company has over 1,000 buses operating 130 routes, and you can get all over the city. Well, there's even numerous buses that take you to IKEA, which is a great place to get furniture and your essentials, but maybe not so well known. They also do fantastic meatballs and really economical meals as well. If you want to get a bit of a crack about IKEA, I'll put a link into a local Irish comedian, his experiences of going to IKEA for the first time. So check that out over here. In terms of public transport costs, fares cost €2 for a 90-minute ride. So regardless of your duration or how many trips you take, 90 minutes, you can kind of take as many trips as you want on the buses and the LUAS. Also useful to know that children under 5 are free and children over 5 are reduced rate. Yeah, I strongly recommend getting a LEAP transport card. Gives you some good discounts on trips with the benefit and rates that €8 will get you an unlimited 24-hour trip on all transport systems, or only €5.60 on the bus only option. With a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, it's quite difficult hopping on and off the buses, and so there's other options as well if you need to do specific single trips. So the public transport might be very useful in the city, but coming from a country like South Africa where we love to drive and we have our own vehicles to get around, that's a bit of a transition. Ireland has car ride share options, and there are apps you can use to hire a car by the hour. Two most common ones are GoCar and YUKO. Even as a South African with a South African driver's license, it is acceptable and you can use their system. You might just need a credit card that's accepted on their system. So we can make good use of their system. They have runaround city cars, larger SUV type cars for day trips, as well as panel vans and larger vans for transporting and small house moves. We definitely made use of the latter when it came to moving our cargo that came from South Africa. Also, when we moved from our temporary accommodation to our permanent accommodation, hiring a vehicle van for a couple hours definitely helped. The way they work is petrol or fuel is included, as well as insurance, and the first 50 kilometers are included. Might not be very useful for your longer weekend trip getaways. That might work out a bit expensive, but for a few hours driving around town where you want a bit of independence and freedom, definitely a good option. Yeah, definitely not sponsored, but it's just our view and opinion of them. YUKO and GoCar, they're both very similar. I'd suggest just joining on both. Sometimes you'll find that the locations of where you can find the vehicles, one might just be closer or more convenient than the other. They may work very similarly and they're very similar pricing. I'll throw up some of the cost options in the systems so you can have a look. I'd say GoCar has a wider footprint across the whole of Ireland, while YUKO is more Dublin based, and their vehicles are really awesome. Driving a YUKO gave me a good test drive of the vehicle that I ended up buying secondhand as my main primary personal vehicle. So yeah, YUKO Toyota vehicles, quite good. Another option for getting around is using taxi cab services. In Dublin and Ireland, there's a very useful app called the FreeNow app. Most of the taxi cabs will be connected to this, so it's quite convenient to connect to it. I'd say it's probably more popular here than the Uber app or things like that you might be used to in other countries. So if you're coming, just download the FreeNow app beforehand. Our first trip from the airport to the Lorgan, about 30 kilometers south, ended up costing us just under €100. So that was probably one of our most expensive trips when we first got here, but we did have 8 or 9 bags and kids, so we needed to hire an extra large van to take us to our initial accommodation point. Going back, if you use the FreeNow app or other services rather than just hailing a taxi at the airport, it can definitely be a lot cheaper. So it's one way to prepare and save in advance. In terms of the road network and tolls and other costs of owning a car, I think the road network in Ireland is quite well developed, and having a personal car, you can definitely get around quite easily and quite safely. They're well maintained, but they do have a lot of tolls on them. So if you're around Dublin, the M50 toll is definitely quite exorbitant. A lot of the main routes on the motorways between the larger cities like Dublin, Galway, Dublin down to Cork, you're going to end up with 2 or 3 or 4 tolls on a trip. Yeah, when we went to Galway, 180 kilometers, there were 3 tolls included on that trip. Each toll was about €2 to €3 per toll for a small vehicle. In terms of the Dublin transport network, you've got the main circular road, the M50, kind of goes in a loop around the city, and it ends up Dublin Tunnel, which kind of gets you right into the city centre. The tunnel is tolled, and that can be quite a pricey element as well. So if you're looking to find accommodation and you are kind of into the south or a bit further away from Dublin and you're working in the city centre, take into account that the toll for peak times has just gone up now as of 2025. €13 if you're travelling into the city between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. Monday to Friday in the southbound direction, and if you're travelling northbound in the afternoon between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m, €12, €3.50 at all other times of the day. But the tunnel is quite a good example again of some really good world-class infrastructure that's been developed in the last 20 years. So the tunnel was constructed in the early 2000s. The tunnel is 4.5 kilometers long. Construction started in June 2001 and officially opened all traffic in January 2007 at the cost of about €750 million. But looking at the traffic and the congestion impact and just the ability to get into the city quicker, definitely a worthwhile investment. I'd also recommend getting an e-tag or an e-flow tag if you have a vehicle. The M50 toll is a barrierless toll system, so it's license plate recognition. And if you don't have a tag, you'll need to go online and pay by 8 o'clock the next night. Otherwise, you end up getting penalties on the toll cost. You can either register to get an e-tag, but then you get significant savings on the cost per trip. So worthwhile if you're going to be traveling around. €2.50 for a motor vehicle on the e-toll if you have the tag. €3.80 if you don't. So definitely a big benefit to have that, even if you're just doing 1 or 2 trips a month on it. So as I said, owning a car is definitely still a necessity if you're going to be traveling around, need it for work. Some good car incentives with different companies. I was lucky enough to be able to get a car allowance and get a reasonable car. I bought a second-hand Toyota CHR hybrid. It's really good fuel economy, up to 20 kilometers per litre. A really lovely car to drive. I wanted to do a comparison of this vehicle, what it would cost in South Africa, but not even available in South Africa. When it comes to insurances, anybody coming into Ireland the first year that you're here, when you first get your Irish license, it's definitely going to be quite expensive. And the comparison of car insurance for a new car versus an old car, I'm used to in South Africa, the older the car, the cheaper the insurance. Here it's not quite that way. A 2009 Toyota Auris insurance for a year was around €1,400 for my wife, whereas my 2018 Toyota might have cost 3 times the purchase price, but the insurance was €1,500 per year. So not much difference on the value or the age of the vehicle. I think it's just the risk that each driver and each vehicle has on the road is quite equal. So we feel quite safe. The roads are quite well managed. I think one of the interesting observations in Ireland, the Garda, which is the protectors of the peace or the police, they kind of control law enforcement and traffic management. We're used to in South Africa having different departments and different functions, and often you find that the police can't do certain things on the road offences. They have to wait for the traffic law enforcement, and it kind of is a bit of a loophole, undermines some of those empowers that are granted on the police or the traffic because they kind of have to work together, so they're not as efficient. The Gardaí kind of have a lot more control and rights, and they can do a lot more, so they seem to be more in control. From an insurance point of view, it is compulsory and a legal responsibility to have your vehicle insured. So if you don't have insurance on your vehicle, the Gardaí can impound it and take it away. So definitely insurance is important. Probably the highest cost of ownership of a vehicle is the insurance every year. As a South African, getting an Irish driver's license was actually very simple. As a recognized state, South Africa, coming to Ireland, all I had to do was get a optometrist letter confirming my vision and submitted that with an online application, €55 to the Road Safety Authority, and within 2 weeks, Irish driver's license was submitted to me. In Ireland, your driver's license is valid for 10 years. In South Africa, it's valid for only 5 years, so it can be renewed a little bit more frequently. Depending on the age of the vehicle, you need to have it go through a national certificate of testing, an NCT test. So the older the vehicle, the more often it has to be checked. Maybe that's also why there's less accidents, is because the roadworthiness of the vehicles is more frequently controlled. Unlike South Africa, where it only has to go through a roadworthy when you change ownership. Once for the first 4 years, and then every 2 years after that until the vehicle is 10 years old. This costs €60 per test. Another cost is that of a motor tax. So this is based on the carbon dioxide emissions. So having a hybrid vehicle, you end up paying less tax than with a normal conventional petrol engine, depending on the carbon dioxide emissions. transportation. My 1.8 litre hybrid, only €180 per year for the motor tax, whereas a 1.6 litre conventional engine in my wife's Toyota Auris is €400 per year. Cheapest options in terms of motor tax are your electric vehicles. They have a flat rate of only €120 per year, and there's a lot of tax incentives to own an electric vehicle. So although Ireland is moving towards being quite electric vehicle friendly, there's still a barrier to entry in terms of the charge station. So in the bigger cities, and if you're at home, you can charge quite easily and get incentives to have a charge station. But over the entire country, there's only 800, 350 kilowatt chargers, about 420, 200 kilowatt medium speed chargers, and about 4,500 22 kilowatt conventional chargers. With the number of electric vehicles rising, there has to be quite a few more investments in charging stations. Otherwise, you find that on the motorways and on the longer trips, there's quite a few queues to get your vehicle charged. As opposed to having a hybrid, you've kind of got the best of both. Mild hybrid, like the Toyota, ultimately it's got regenerative braking, so you don't need to do anything other than just drive efficiently and economically. And as you're braking, that regenerates the battery, which then runs the vehicle at low speed. Hence, it can get up to 25, 26 kilometers per litre in town driving conditions. As I said as well, it's recommended that if you stay in here for longer than a year, it's important to get your foreign driver's license converted as quickly as possible. But you are allowed to drive on your foreign driver's license for up to 12 months, or you have to change. It does have an impact on the cost of insurance. So the sooner you get your Irish validated license, the sooner those costs can come down. There are a lot of similarities between driving in South Africa and driving in Ireland. Obviously, coming from an English-speaking Commonwealth background, a lot of similar English standards. I would note that in the cities, in the residential areas, you've got 30 kilometer hour speeds, so a lot slower, as well as 50 kilometer hour. And also on the main motorways, you have 120 kilometers, but most of the national roads, the speed limit is 100 kilometers an hour. So it's a little bit slower. There's also a lot of bus lanes. There's a priority given to public transport. So if you're driving your vehicle, normally you need to keep out of the bus lane, otherwise there's some hefty fines that can be issued. And also a lot of the traffic lights, you find that there's a lot of directional lights. So there might be a green arrow to go right and a green arrow to go straight. So just because the light is green doesn't mean you can go until the green in the direction you want to go. So that takes a little bit of getting used to. When it comes to the Irish driver's license itself, we noticed that there's a lot of cars with an N. In South Africa, we're only used to the L for the learner. Here you get an N for novice. So once you get your driver's license, you actually have to have a novice license for 2 years, which kind of restricts you on a few elements as well. Some of these restrictions are that you can't be accompanied by learner drivers. The novices face stricter disqualification or even a 6-month ban if they accumulate 7 penalty points on their license within 3 years, compared to a more lenient 12 points for somebody on a full driver's license. They're also restricted to a lower blood alcohol limit. The novice drivers have a blood alcohol concentration limit of 20 milligrams per 100 mils compared to 50 milligrams for a full licensed driver. Normally they're a bit younger, but more inexperienced, so they definitely do get identified as such, and it can be good. Yeah, just going back to some of those comparisons with South Africa. South Africa has a very vast network of roads spanning 750,000 kilometers. The extensive road network includes national highways, regional roads, and urban streets. And the country's road infrastructure is crucial for both local transportation and international trade. There's some good scenic routes and covers a diverse range of landscapes. South Africa doesn't have the same level of public transportation, especially intercity. It really becomes critical to have your private vehicles in South Africa. Ireland, in comparison, the national road network alone makes up approximately 13,000 kilometers. The Irish motorways makes up just under 1,000 kilometers of this, with plans to increase this to 1,100 kilometers by 2035. The national roads are mixed into primary and secondary roads, and they make up 5,300 kilometers. In 2023, South Africa recorded 11,883 fatalities on the road, as opposed to Ireland in the same year, 60 fatalities on the road attributed to network. So South Africa has a death per kilometer factor of 22 times higher than that of Ireland. And South Africa, the percentage of the total population is 0.02% that die every year on the road, as opposed to Ireland, it's a percentage 0.001% die on the road every year. So again, it's a factor of 20. So as a South African, every time you get in a car, you're 20 times more likely to die on the road. It kind of makes you wonder, is it just a lack of valuing life? Is it the mechanical issues? Is it the governance and the enforcement? Or has South Africa just given up on trying to stop the carnage? Everybody knows somebody that has been involved in a fatal accident. One of my favorite ways to get around Dublin is cycling. There is a very good cycle network in some of the cities and even in between some of the cities. But depending on where you stay, try and plan that you are close enough to work that you can take advantage of cycle network. Ireland might be a wet country, but the rain is very intermediate, so it comes and goes. So in 6 months of driving to work and cycling to work, I've cycled almost 600 kilometers to work and only got wet in the rain on 3 occasions. So as long as you dress for the weather, it's all good. Irish say there's no such thing as bad weather, there's just bad clothing. So as long as you're prepared, you can get around it. I'm luckily only 8 kilometers from work. It's actually quicker to cycle to work than it is to drive to work on some mornings because of the traffic. One of the advantages of it as well is Ireland has a cycle to work scheme, which is a government initiative that's designed to encourage employees to cycle to work and makes it tax incentivized, that employers offer schemes to buy bicycles. I was able to buy a electric bicycle that normally would cost €1,800, but €1,500 of that was tax incentivized by the cycle to work scheme and can basically be written off prior to your tax and only paid off over 12 months to your employer through their scheme. So definitely an advantage. It's nice to have it as a backup fallback plan. Still good to have a vehicle as well to get around for the days like this week where it's -2, -3 in the morning. There's a lot of frost on the roads. Generally 3 to 4 days a week. It's good to get out on the bicycle and enjoy the fresh air. You can take advantage of the bicycle scheme once every 4 years. So the electric bicycle I got is a 10 ways city cycle bike. So it's very light, very efficient. According to European standards, it's a pedal assisted. So you still have to pedal, still getting a good bit of exercise, but it really picks up speed quite quickly and it's limited to 25 kilometers per hour. So whether there's hills, wind or other, it kind of averages that 25 kilometers an hour very efficiently. So yeah, makes the 7.5 kilometers to work very quick, 18-19 minutes and I'm there. And obviously there's the advantage of not spending money on petrol, and the electric bike gets about 50 to 100 kilometers depending on intensity of the electric assist before you have to charge it. So I'm only having to charge it once or twice a week, and that is pretty quick and efficient. Lastly, as a bit of a surprise, we ended up hiring a motorhome over the December period and did a significant amount of traveling around Ireland. So if you're planning on coming on holiday, yeah, one option is to think about a camper van motorhome. Ireland is very good when it comes to wild camping or camping in camper vans in camper van sites. Can be quite a lot cheaper to combine both your transport and your accommodation in one. And you can definitely get around to a lot more of the landscapes and tourist destinations this way. And in winter, we were able to get some pretty good discounted rates when it comes to hiring a motorhome. I think it's a lot more busy and conventional that this happens in the summer tourist season. Yeah, so keep an eye out for some more videos following of our Wild Atlantic Way winter camper trip. We managed to do 2,900 kilometers in 12 nights, all the way from Hook's Head in the southeast of Ireland up to Slieve League just north of Donegal, and yeah, it was a fantastic experience. So we will definitely go into a bit of detail. I was able to fly my drone quite a lot, got a lot of good footage on some windy days, some rainy days, but generally some pretty good sunny days. So we're looking to share some of those experiences with you. If you're looking to plan a camper holiday, there's a lot of opportunities. If you found anything interesting in this video, you know what to do. Hit the like, click subscribe, turn on the notifications, and leave some comments on what you would like to see. Thanks for watching and have a great beginning to 2025.